Basic animal genetic concepts. Genetic terminology: genetics/heredity, genes, chromosomes and alleles, homozygous and heterozygous. The distinction between genotype and phenotype, dominant and recessive genes. The monohybrid inheritance/crosses, Mendel's first law, law of segregation. The dihybrid inheritance/dihybrid crosses, Mendel's second law, law of independent assortment. The use of various methods such as Punnett square, genetic diagrams and schematic representations to illustrate the crosses. Mendel's laws of segregation and independent recombination of characteristics. Qualitative and quantitative characteristics. Aims of lesson. At the end of the lesson, learners should be able to define concepts relating to creative thinking and problem solving. Apply the knowledge and skills associated with the topic of basic genetic concepts as mentioned above. Introduction. Previous content that was dealt with in Term 2 must be linked to the current content. Animal diseases and protection. Purpose of the next lesson is to discuss the content associated with basic animal genetics. Concepts and skills. Agricultural genetics. What is genetics? Genetics is the study of the DNA structure that contains an organism's traits and how these traits are passed on or inherited from generation to generation. It deals with the transmission of traits and the characteristics of genetic material such as chromosomes and genes. Studying genetics is vital in agriculture and animal husbandry because breeding of good livestock and plant cultivars is determined by informed decisions made by farmers when crossing animals, cultivars or breeds. Heredity chromosome. Heredity is the passing of traits or characteristics of parents or ancestors to offspring. Hereditary characteristics include skin or hair color, height, structural arrangement of the body such as frame or skeletal size, soundness of feet and legs, and reproductive soundness. These characteristics are passed on to the daughter cells from the parent cells when parent cells divide. Chromosomes consist of coiled or wound-up strands of DNA C, deoxyribonucleic acid, wrapped around proteins called histones. Hereditary information is stored in the DNA of chromosomes. Chromosomes are found in the nucleus of the cell. Genes. Alleles. Genes consist of lengths of DNA that control a characteristic, such as fur color or seed shape. Genes are found on chromosomes. The position of a gene on a chromosome is called a locus. Different forms of a gene are called alleles. Alleles carry different information about the same characteristic. For example, if the characteristic is fur color, there may be an allele for brown fur color and an allele for white fur color. Careful, take a look at the two following diagrams. Homozygous heterozygotes. If a gene and its allele are identical for a characteristic, then the individual is said to be homozygous for that characteristic. For example, both genes code for brown fur. If a gene and its allele are non-identical for a characteristic, then the individual is said to be heterozygous for that characteristic. For example, one gene codes for brown fur and the other for white fur. Dominant genes, recessive genes. The dominant allele blocks the action of the other allele, called the recessive allele. When only one dominant allele is inherited from one parent, it masks the effect of a recessive allele. Dominant alleles are shown using a capital letter. For example, T for tall. Alleles that are weak can only express the heritable characteristic in the offspring when they are inherited by both parents. They are shown using a small letter T for short. 1. Dominant allele will suppress the expression of a recessive allele. Genotype, phenotype. The genotype is the genetic composition of an individual. The genotype of an organism, for example, an Aberdeen Angus bull, is represented by two letters. Each letter represents one allele of the genes that controls the trait, usually the first letter of the dominant allele is used as the symbol to represent the gene. The outward appearance of an individual is called the phenotype. The outward appearance of an individual is determined by the genotype, as well as influences from the environment. For example, there are clear differences in phenotype in Aberdeen Angus cattle. Some have long legs and others have short legs. Some are black and others are red. Monohybrid and dihybrid inheritance. Methods to illustrate crosses. Genetic diagrams. Punnett squares. Schematic representations. When we show genetic crosses, we use the following symbols. P1, parental, represents the parent generation. F1, first filial, represents the first generation of offspring. F2, second filial, represents the second generation of offspring, and so on. Monohybrid crosses. A monohybrid cross is a genetic cross between two individuals involving a single pair of contrasting characteristics, for example green seeds versus yellow seeds in pea plants. Monohybrid crosses are also called single-trait crosses. Mendel's first law, law of segregation. The law of segregation is based on 5 main concepts. A gene can exist in more than one form, that is, there are alleles. Organisms inherit two alleles for each trait, one from their mother and one from their father. When gametes are produced, by meiosis, allele pairs separate so that each gamete contains only one allele of the gene for a trait. Fertilization gives each new individual two alleles for each trait. The dominant allele determines how the offspring expresses that trait. Dihybrid crosses. A dihybrid cross is a cross between two individuals that have different alleles for two selected traits. A dihybrid cross is often used to test for dominant and recessive genes in two separate traits. Mendel used dihybrid crossing to determine if different traits of pea plants, such as flower, color and seed shape, were inherited independently. From his experiments, he developed his second law, the law of independent assortment or independent recombination. Law of independent assortment or independent recombination. Mendel's law of independent assortment, also known as independent recombination, states that pairs of alleles separate independently during the formation of gametes. This means that traits are passed to offspring independently of one another. Qualitative and quantitative characteristics. Qualitative traits are characterized by segregation in the classical Mendelian ratios. The coat color gene in the Labrador Retriever will be expressed in one of two characteristics, either as black or as yellow. The yellow color is recessive and the black is dominant. Qualitative characteristics are characteristics that can take only a few fixed forms. Examples are gender of offspring, horns or pole in cattle, and hair color. These characteristics are controlled by one pair of genes. Qualitative, descriptive and subjective measure. Classification into a few distinct groups. Examples: hair color, horns/polled, blood types. Few genes control, often only one pair. Environment has little if any influence. Progress not too difficult with one gene. Economic importance. Quantitative characteristics can take on a whole series of values, without clear boundary lines between the different classes. Many characteristics of economic importance in farm animals fall into this category. Examples are body size, wool production, milk production, crop yield, disease resistance in plants. Quantitative characteristics are usually determined by a number of genes. This is called polygenic inheritance and is controlled by multiple genes. Examples of quantitative characteristics are weight gain in animals and fat content of meat. Quantitative, much greater economic importance. Objectively and numerically measured. Continuous variation, unlimited number of observations. Many genes control 50, 100, or more pairs. Examples: milk production, racing speed, weight, rib eye area. Loin eye area, racing speed. Activity/assessment. Learners can also use the following sources of information to do activities. Relevant grade 12 textbooks. Focus Control Textbook Grade 12. Mind the Gap Agricultural Sciences Grade 12. Pass Agricultural Sciences Grade 12, Unit 7, page 86. Pass Grade November 12th Exam Papers. Consolidation. The lesson covered the content as stipulated in the CAPS document. Learners who understand the content should apply the knowledge and skills required to successfully answers questions based on the curriculum content. Learners will be able to use the knowledge and skills as a sound foundation for progression to the next topic. The pattern of inheritance, variation and mutation.
Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more future educational videos.